Point is, you're welcome,
For
I
what?
guess, because I'm your nuclear deterrent. It's working. We're safe. America is secure. You want my property? You can't have it. But I did you a big favor. I have successfully privatized world peace.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and we've got some breaking news here on the channel within the last, 24 hours. Word has come out that Dan Slott's time on Tony Stark Iron Man is coming to an end at the end of the Iron Man 2020 event. He's going to be off the title. Obviously, we don't know exactly who's going to be taking over, but they just returned Tony Stark as Iron Man to the Marvel Comics universe a couple of years ago, beginning with Dan Slott's run. So I expect the character to basically be relaunched at a new -- probably a new title for the comic book going forward, and certainly a new creative team. And I think this is, basically good news, for Tony Stark fans. Obviously, there are those that are enjoying Dan Slott's take on the character and his run, but I think there are far more Tony Stark fans that would prefer a new voice and a new creative direction for the character. So we are going to be getting that. First, I'm going to read an article from CBR.com talking about the details of Dan Slott's exit on Tony Stark Iron Man. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the state of Dan Slott's career coming into the event, why it was a little bit of an odd choice to select him for this comic book to begin with. And then we'll talk about kind of how Tony Stark Iron Man under Dan Slott kind of fell off the rails, most specifically about Iron Man 2020, which has been a kind of basically a disaster. Of course, the event is ongoing. It was interrupted by the coronavirus COVID-19 interruption that we saw in comic book distribution, and we're waiting for that event, obviously, to finish up. But first, let's read the article from CBR.com, Sam Stone. After 2 years writing the solo Iron Man comic book, Dan Slott is closing out his tenure with the Armored Avenger with his summer's Iron Man 2020 #6. Co-written by Christos Gage and illustrated by Pete Woods, the issue closes out the Iron Man 2020 miniseries that saw Tony Stark's long-lost brother Arno replace him as the new Iron Man after Tony's apparent death in the conclusion of Slott's first Iron Man series, Tony Stark Iron Man. According to Slott, he always planned to conclude his run on Iron Man with the 25th issue, closing out Tony's ambitious status quo with an epic finale in 2020. Over the course of Slott's run, artificial intelligence was introduced to Earth, with sentient machines forming their own community around the world. After Tony's apparent death, Arno replaced him to regulate the rise of artificial intelligence, with Tony's return teased since the launch of Iron Man 2020 this past January, setting up a showdown between the two siblings. Written by Dan Slott and Christos Gage and illustrated by Pete Woods, Iron Man 2020 #6 is tentatively scheduled to go on sale 24 June from Marvel Comics. So there you have it, folks. Dan Slott is exiting Iron Man after Iron Man 2020 #6. And I must say, he was always an odd choice to begin with for this title. Iron Man had been out of the Marvel comic universe for years. I believe it was 6 or 7 years after Tony Stark disappeared and Riri Williams kind of took up the armor, and he was essentially an AI basically helping her through her adventures. And people have been clamoring for Tony Stark Iron Man to return to the Marvel Comics universe. It was so weird not having him there with the explosion of the MCU and the popularity of the character with Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Tony Stark on the big screen, really the heart and soul of the MCU. To not have an Iron Man solo series in Marvel Comics was just a really bad choice. So everyone was really excited when C.B. Cebulski came in and he brought back Bruce Banner as the Hulk. He brought back Thor as Thor. Imagine that. Tony Stark as Iron Man, and brought back a lot of the original heroes back with their own solo titles. And of course, the Avengers by Jason Aaron was also launched, and that had a lot of those characters as well. But Dan Slott was coming off an abysmal run on Amazing Spider-Man. It was almost universally loathed as being atrocious. He never really created that memorable run or that memorable story with Amazing Spider-Man. And it was basically 8 years in purgatory for fans of Peter Parker. And along the way, Dan Slott got really wrapped up in Twitter beefs, and it really soured people's perception of him, not only as a person, but as a creator, because he was pretty rude about all that stuff, and he was not very engaging. And when he was engaging, he was kind of downright rude with people, especially if you had even the littlest bit of criticism for his Amazing Spider-Man run, which was not very good to begin with. Although I will admit, there at the end, he seemed to leave social media. You didn't see him on Twitter. I don't think he was really on Facebook very much. And his last story arc with the Red Goblin on Amazing Spider-Man was really good. People loved it. And actually, it was very highly praised. So it was interesting that he was able to leave such a terrible run on Marvel's marquee character on a high note. But then he was kind of picked for Fantastic Four and Iron Man. Everyone knows that Dan Slott can't write more than one comic book at a time. He loses focus, and the quality on both series really tanks. And if I'm being completely honest, he certainly shouldn't have got the Return of the Fantastic Four to Marvel Comics. That should have gone to Chip Zdarsky. But him being the Iron Man writer, I don't know. It just felt like a square peg in a round hole to begin with, and it just never worked out. When he relaunched the Iron Man series, it was more of a like Iron Man family series. And Tony was really subservient to the other characters in the comic book, most notably Jocasta, like a female robot. Like Tony Stark would ever feel inferior to a robot that he created, even after what happened with Ultron. So Slott's launch with a new Tony Stark Iron Man series was just putrid, to be completely honest. I actually read a couple of them. Even though I don't like Dan Slott, and generally speaking, I don't read his comic books, I did want to be in the know about Iron Man, and it was a terrible take on the character. Seeing him basically simp for a female robot was one of the dumbest things in the world I've ever seen. It was full of talking cats and crap like that. A bunch of stuff you wouldn't want to see of an Iron Man comic series. People wanted to return to the character. That's why they wanted him back in the Marvel Comics universe. They wanted something more akin, obviously, to the heyday of Tony Stark, or even with shades of Robert Downey Jr.'s take on the character in the MCU, to where maybe he could move to the forefront of Marvel Comics, because he's always been more of a B, C-list character. He's never been A-list in Marvel as far as being able to lead his own tentpole series as the solo character. He's always been a few rungs below, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and some of those other big characters. And yeah, like I said, Dan Slott was a terrible choice. He's far out of his prime, and maybe he can do a storyline here or there that resonates, but even those are few and far between these days. And I remember when they announced the Iron Man 2020 event that was coming up, I was pretty excited. I was like, thank goodness, maybe Dan Slott is off of the series and they're going to get some new blood in here, a new direction. Turns out that was going to be a Dan Slott-led series. I believe Jim Zub was supposed to be his co-writer on Iron Man by that time, and he was going to help him write that Iron Man 2020 event as well. But he kind of peeled off. Christos Gage, actually one of my favorite writers, came in as his co-writer to finish up his Iron Man run and then do the Iron Man 2020 event. He also penned a lot of the tie-in series as well, but it's bad. Like, it's even worse than the stuff I read in Iron Man. It's one of the worst event books I read in a very long time. I'd put it right up there with Age of X-Men, just as far as low quality writing and things that nobody really was interested in. It was just a rehash of a bunch of stuff nobody wanted to begin with. We've already seen Tony Stark killed off how many times now? 5 times? Oh, great. The revelation was Tony Stark never really returned to the Marvel Universe. It was like a robot version of himself, and he's off somewhere else, raising an AI army because he's not really a person anymore, because he's been dead the whole time. It was a weird read, to be completely honest. Arno Stark and his henchmen felt like the heroes of the story. I'm never going to root for AI robots to come up and take over the world. It's like, who would actually root for this? So it was a terrible take on the character, terrible story arc. Of course, it's not over, and I guarantee you it's going to end very poorly, because I read the first 2 or 3 issues, reviewed one of them on the channel, and it's a joke. It's a joke of a series. It's going out on a very low note. Do I think that Dan Slott's time at Marvel Comics is winding down? Absolutely not. It doesn't seem to matter what this guy writes that's really bad. He gets another opportunity. He'll probably be writing Hulk or Hawkeye or another really important Avengers character that he can ruin their solo series while they do something completely different in the Avengers series, because they don't line up. Like, if you've been reading Avengers and you've been reading Tony Stark Iron Man, the two characters couldn't be more different. Tony Stark is alive in Avengers. Of course, they did have to send him back in time. I think he's in the Ice Age or something stupid like that right now, just to accommodate Dan Slott's really stupid Iron Man 2020 event that basically had no sales to begin with. Was just terrible. And like I said, a real bad note for Dan Slott to go on. Am I happy he's leaving Iron Man? Yes, he's a bad fit to the character. He's way past his prime. He shouldn't really be writing any major characters at Marvel. Do I want him to lose his job? No, I don't want anyone to lose their job right now. It's terrible times. Too many people are losing their jobs because of coronavirus, COVID-19. But I don't think he should be getting the premier writing gigs at Marvel because he has proven himself to be wanting and to be lacking, to be quite frank. He doesn't really have good, innovative ideas. He doesn't have good takes on the characters. And most of what he does right now is destroy instead of help build up or create. And, I'm glad he's off Iron Man. Hopefully he's off Fantastic Four very soon. I'd love to see Chip Zdarsky on Fantastic Four. Who would I like to see on Iron Man? That's a tough question. I think Christos Gage, who's his co-writer right now, would be an amazing Iron Man writer. I don't see him getting that opportunity, but I guarantee he'd knock it out of the park. Another guy that I think would do phenomenal with the Tony Stark Iron Man series is Rick Remender. Sounds like he's not all that keen to return to Marvel, but the guy writes really good flawed heroes, and science fiction. So I think he would probably be the best fit for Iron Man, maybe outside of Scott Snyder, who I believe is still DC exclusive right now. But hey, if they can pull Rick Remender into the fold and get him on an Iron Man series, that would be the coup de grace. That would be amazing and really show that Marvel Comics is serious about the quality of Tony Stark, the character in the series moving forward. Don't see that happening. I would like to see Christos Gage. Don't see that happening as well. We'll probably get another writer that we're all pretty disappointed in, but only time will tell, as we obviously haven't been told who the new writer of Iron Man is moving forward. So that will wrap up today's video. Going to be a big day on the channel. Here in a few hours, Perch is going to join me, and we're going to talk about the first new comic book day for comics in 4 weeks. With the return of new DC Comics on 28 April, we're going to talk about some of the issues that were had with the new distribution and some of those things like that. And later in the day, Paley is going to join me and talk about the 5 comic books and talk about the 5 comic book collectors need to be looking at and buying right now, as he thinks they're about to skyrocket in price and value. And so that'll basically wrap up today's video. Dan Slott is off Iron Man. We don't know who the new creative team is, but I thought he was a bad choice from the beginning. I read the beginning few issues of Iron Man. That was all confirmed. And then I jumped back in on Iron Man 2020, and it was double confirmed. Terrible take on the character. Terrible fit for the character. I'm glad Dan Slott's leaving, and we'll see what he does next. Thanks, y'all. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.